Husband got depressed because his ex-GF made him regret getting married, then asked me to stay faithful while he lives the single life. When I said no, he insults me, so I left him. About 5 months ago, my husband, Sam, was formally diagnosed with severe depression. It wasn't a very shocking revelation to me, as I'd suspected for a while that my partner was not really doing mentally well this year. He seemed to be deeply mourning over the loss of both his ex-girlfriend and his best friend. Both of these people had once meant a lot to him, and he had been incredibly close to them. For context, before Sam and I started ever dating, he and his ex were in a serious relationship for a very long time. Then, out of nowhere, she cheated on him with his best friend, someone he considered like a brother. This betrayal cut him deeply, marking the end of two of his most important relationships at once. After that, Sam stayed single for a long time as he was afraid to trust anyone else. He needed time to deal with the pain and sort through his emotions. By the time I met him, he seemed to have made peace with both of it and was trying to move on. Still, the hurt from being betrayed was still there, making him a bit cautious. We dated for 4 wonderful years where we went through our ups and downs before deciding to finally get married. We had a beautiful wedding surrounded by friends, family, and the people who mattered most to us. The day was filled with so much joy and love. I have to say that, initially, Sam was an incredible partner, supportive, kind, and deeply caring. Marriage brought us even closer, and for years, we have built a life together that felt strong and promising. But then, earlier this year, tragedy struck. Sam's ex-girlfriend and his former best friend died together in a car accident. The news hit him hard. For years, he had held on to resentment, but now, faced with their deaths, he was overwhelmed by grief he hadn't expected. Something inside him seemed to shatter completely. Sam sometimes shared with me how he wished he'd been able to resolve things with them. He expressed remorse for not having been able to reconcile, to forgive them fully, or at least to speak his piece. Knowing they were gone forever, without the chance for closure, seemed to weigh heavily on his heart. I reassured him that it was okay to feel this way after all, they had been an important part of his life. But he started to blame himself for not mending things with them before they passed away. You see, Sam's best friend had reached out multiple times over the years, apologizing and trying to make amends. Yet, Sam couldn't bring himself to forgive him, which I don't blame him for. I mean, it's not every day that your best buddy sleeps with your partner. Even though the apology was there, the pain of the past was something Sam couldn't just put aside. I would comfort him by repeatedly reminding him that what happened wasn't his fault, and that he had every right to protect himself from further hurt. But no amount of reassurance seemed to help him. Instead, Sam's grief only grew, spiraling into something darker and harder to manage. He would spend hours and hours just lying in bed, often losing entire days to video games or, at times, just staring blankly at the wall, a beer in hand. He began skipping work, calling in sick, or just staying home without any explanation. I could see he was sinking deeper into despair, and I tried my best to encourage him, to get him out of the house and do things that might help him feel better, even just a little. I suggested small outings or anything that might offer a distraction, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Due to his lack of motivation to go to work, he lost his job, so I became the primary breadwinner. Slowly after this, my husband's behavior started to change in other unsettling ways. His mood became hard to predict, shifting between being easily irritated and shutting down completely. He grew distant and defensive and would snap at me over the smallest thing. On top of not working, he did nothing to help me around the house anymore. As a result, household responsibilities piled up, and I found myself carrying the weight of daily life without his support, all the while watching him drift further away. Even then, I still loved him, so I thought maybe we could still make it through this. However, things just got worse. Sam started to pick fights with me if I stayed out too late, whether it was for work or just to unwind with friends on a Friday. I would come back home to see him sitting on the couch waiting for me. He would ask me multiple questions about why I was out so late and who I was spending so much time with. Even if I answered him honestly, he'd hint that he didn't believe me and accuse me of maybe sleeping with my coworkers or friends, saying that's why I was never home. Hearing these baseless accusations from him was both painful and offensive. No matter what I told to reassure him that I would never cheat on him, he just didn't listen. As a result, we began having intense, exhausting arguments where he demanded that I come straight back home after work, and even on weekends, he wanted me to stay home with him as if my time belonged to him alone. I started to feel suffocated, like the space I once had in our marriage was shrinking, replaced by his insecurities and anger. Things escalated when his frustration started spilling over physically. There were 2 alarming instances where he crossed a line I never thought he would. In one of our arguments, he punched a wall just above my head in a fit of anger, a violent display that left me feeling unsettled and wary. But the real breaking point came when, During another heated moment, he slapped me and I almost stumbled to the ground. My husband is a much bigger man than me, so I was completely shaken. That moment was a clear sign to me that his grief and depression had morphed into something darker and more dangerous. I realized I couldn't stay in a relationship where my safety and well-being were at risk, so I packed my bags, ready to leave him and protect myself. Seeing me ready to walk out the door brought him to a state of desperation. He pleaded with me to stay, promising me over and over that he would change himself. I stood firm, telling him that for me to even consider staying, he would need to seek real help. He agreed, saying he would go to a doctor if it meant he had a chance to save our marriage. Reluctantly, I decided to give our relationship one last try, hoping he would actually commit to the help he so clearly needed. It was a difficult decision, filled with doubt, but I wanted to believe that the man I had fallen in love with could still find his way back to himself, and to us. This was when Sam was diagnosed with severe depression. He started taking medication weekly and began meditating to help manage his anger. Eventually, I could see some positive changes slowly emerging. The medication seemed to help stabilize his mood, and he made genuine efforts to be more present and helpful around the house. Little by little, I saw glimpses of the person he used to be, the man I fell in love with, and it gave me hope. He showed more willingness to reconnect, and I felt a bit of relief that maybe, with time, things could improve for us. However, a major issue remained unresolved: his reluctance to return to work and start earning money. He hasn't held any job since his diagnosis, and this has been a source of ongoing tension between us. I don't mind being the only one bringing in all the money, however I do want him to at least try. Every time I bring it up, hoping to encourage him to consider something, even part-time work or a role he could do from home, he pushes back, insisting that he feels too low and weak to commit to any job. This disagreement eventually led to both of us yelling at each other. On one hand, I know he has been struggling, but on the other hand, the added financial strain and his refusal to even explore options have left me feeling frustrated and alone in carrying all the responsibilities. Last month, Sam surprised me by suggesting we see a couples counselor. He shared that with our ongoing relationship issues, he felt we should see someone who could help us communicate more effectively and work through some of our issues. He then went on to say how he had already reached out to a counselor and made an appointment, so all I had to do was show up. I agreed, thinking that this counselor could help us strengthen our relationship and, perhaps, offer him encouragement and support to take those first steps toward rebuilding his life back to normal. However, I can honestly say that couples counseling has made our relationship worse. During the sessions, Sam admitted that a big part of his depression comes from the life we've built together. He feels like he hasn't been able to live the way he wanted, since being married brought so much responsibility. He also mentioned that he still misses his ex-girlfriend sometimes and wishes his best friend hadn't taken her from him. In fact, after the betrayal from his ex, he never really healed, and he feels like he's just missed out on life. The more he shared during the sessions, the more I felt like a bystander in my own marriage. He said that he feels like he rushed into a marriage with me without taking the time to enjoy being single, and without exploring what he wanted for himself after his heartbreak from his ex-girlfriend. I was taken aback and reminded him that it was him who had proposed to me and we had dated for a long time before we got married, so how was it that he felt rushed about it? The counselor interrupted me and encouraged my husband to continue to speak his truth even if it hurt my feelings. Over the following sessions, Sam began to confess to me in front of the counselor that he wanted a redo of his single life. However, since we were already married now, he asked if I would consider allowing him to see other people while I stayed committed to our marriage. I scoffed at his question, hoping it was a joke. However, he argued that he deserved to experience both his single life and married life at the same time, and that it was only fair that he have the opportunity to explore and find himself before it was too late for him. I was appalled by his suggestion and didn't hold back in letting him know just how absurd and hurtful it was. I told him his demand was outrageous and unacceptable. If he wanted to live like a single man and explore, I could make that happen by leaving the marriage entirely. I wasn't about to stay in a relationship where I was expected to be loyal while he was free to act however he pleased with strangers. My words seemed to strike a nerve and Sam became furious. He shot back, claiming that I could never understand his feelings because, unlike him, I'd been with multiple people before we ever got together. I calmly reminded him that I'd only had 2 previous relationships before him, both serious, meaningful commitments that simply hadn't worked out. It hurt that he would try to use my past against me as if my experiences somehow made me less entitled to expect commitment in our marriage. I told him that if he felt so strongly about living a single life, he should have thought about that before we walked down the aisle. I reminded him that I had made sacrifices for our relationship this year especially. I had been the one holding down our home, supporting him financially and emotionally through his depression, all because I believed in our marriage and in him. But now, he was making unreasonable demands. It was as if he wanted the security and stability I provided without honoring the commitment that came with it. I couldn't allow that. I told him firmly that he couldn't have it both ways. He needed to make a choice. It was either a committed life with me or a single life without me. He couldn't keep me in limbo, expecting me to bend to his wishes while he kept one foot out the door. Since that confrontation in front of our counselor, Sam has been sulking around the house, acting as if I'm the one who's being unreasonable. He's repeatedly tried to convince me that I'm being too harsh and even selfish for refusing to let him have some fun. He keeps insisting that if I truly loved him, I'd be more open-minded and supportive of his desire to explore. His attempts to guilt me into agreeing make it clear that he still doesn't understand or refuses to understand how disrespectful and unfair his request is. But I'm standing firm. I've tried to be compassionate, understanding, and supportive of him through the ups and downs of his depression, but there are boundaries I won't compromise on. I don't believe that being open-minded means sacrificing my own self-respect and the integrity of our marriage. I refuse to let him manipulate me into thinking that I'm the one in the wrong. So, Reddit Ida for refusing my husband to see other people while we are still married? Update 1. For everyone wondering if Sam might already be cheating and using this as a way to justify his behavior, I honestly don't think that's the case. My husband barely leaves the house. He's constantly around, either playing video games or just idling in his own thoughts. Ironically, if he were having an affair, at least I'd have clarity and a straightforward reason to walk away. Yes, it would hurt, but at least I'd know he could move on without me. Instead, I'm left dealing with this painful and confusing situation. As for everyone wondering why Sam's ex and his best friend's deaths affected him so much all of a sudden, I am none the wiser, but I am just guessing it might have given him a reality check. These were people he knew well, and maybe losing them so unexpectedly made him spiral. I'm not entirely sure. But I've never really understood why it hit him so hard to make him feel so down about it, or why he thinks destroying our marriage and sleeping around will somehow fix this depression. As one commenter pointed out under my post, maybe Sam has never really loved me throughout our marriage. Maybe he just saw me as a safety net, someone reliable and loyal after his relationship with his ex, and he liked that. Maybe he still has unresolved feelings for his ex and now regrets not giving things a chance with her. Whatever the case, it's ridiculous that my husband now wants an open relationship, something I never would have expected, as I'm deeply committed to monogamy. If he had ever hinted at wanting this kind of arrangement before, I would never have married him in the first place. This sudden shift feels like a complete betrayal of the life and values we built together. The reason I haven't already left him is that I genuinely worry about his mental health. He has been my partner for so long, and for years, it really felt like it was just him and me against the world. He was never this mean or selfish. He never raised a hand on me or yelled at me. When he began to change so drastically after the tragic accident involving his ex-girlfriend and best friend, I told myself that it was just a phase, and that he would find his way back in time. I wanted to believe that the man I fell in love with was still there, just buried under all the grief and pain. But now, after everything that's happened, I've finally accepted that it's time for me to choose myself. This marriage has clearly come to an end. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks. Since my last update, I have taken the next step for myself and reached out to a lawyer in private to start the divorce process. Sam and I own our house together, and we have a joint account, but given that he's still unemployed and the financial situation is already strained, I needed to first secure my assets before moving forward with the divorce papers. Once the lawyer told me that everything was finalized, I was preparing myself to break the bad news to him. Then yesterday, Sam crossed a line I simply couldn't ignore anymore, and I realized I couldn't keep my mouth shut any longer. We were at Sam's sister's house for a family lunch. His family is incredibly kind to me, and we've always had a good relationship, so I was looking forward to meeting all of them. For context, his family knows we have been having some issues in our marriage, but no one knows the whole story. During lunch, I noticed Sam was continuously drinking. Now, he's been strongly discouraged from drinking because of his ongoing medications for depression, so seeing him with a glass of whiskey immediately raised red flags for me. When I gently tried to talk to him about it, he scoffed, ignored me, and went right back to drinking. I felt really disrespected, so I left him to do what he wanted. Later, during the meal, as everyone was chatting about their lives, Sam's mother asked how things were going between us and how my work was going. I mentioned that we had been going to couples counseling and that Sam still needed to work through his issues. I then continued telling everyone about my work, when Sam interrupted me by making a comment that caught me off guard. He said that his depression could be cured faster if his wife understood what he really wanted in his life. His mother asked him what he meant by that. This is when Sam openly declared in front of his entire family that I was the reason why his life was so miserable. Everyone stopped eating and just stared at him in confusion. We could all see that he was drunk by now. Sam went on to say how I have refused to give him what he wanted and that I am nothing but a conservative, insecure, and possessive wife who is making him feel suffocated. I could hardly believe what I was hearing, how he was twisting the narrative and putting the blame solely on me. His sister immediately asked him why he was talking about me in such a way. She and I were close, so she looked furious at her brother. The rest of his family sat in stunned silence, clearly shocked by his harsh accusations. I felt humiliated and betrayed, sitting there listening to him as he continued explaining to everyone that all he wanted was a small thing from me, but that I refused to give it to him only out of my stubbornness. Hearing this, I snapped. The way he was trying to paint me as the villain in front of his family was so hurtful. I turned to Sam and demanded to know why he wasn't being honest with his family and giving them the entire truth about what he actually wanted from me. I looked at his family and, with all the frustration and pain I'd been holding in, I told them exactly what Sam had asked of me, how he wanted to explore other relationships, basically sleep around with strangers, while I stayed loyal to him, how he expected me to continue being a supportive wife while he enjoyed his life, unburdened. I laid it all out, revealing the truth he had been hiding. His family was stunned. His mother asked Sam if this was really what he was asking of me. And then, his father, who had always been kind to me, scolded him for being so ridiculous and asked him if he had truly lost his mind. Sam, however, was still trying to justify himself. He insisted that everyone's marriage goes through a stalemate and believed this solution he was proposing would help to solve the issues in our marriage. Sam justified that this was only temporary, that I should feel lucky that he was even asking me for permission when there were so many men who simply cheated on their wives without anybody ever finding out. I yelled at him, telling him that I was sick of him acting this way, trying to justify his sick excuses and selfish behavior. It was a breaking point for me. I announced in front of everyone that I was done with him. I couldn't keep fighting for a marriage that he no longer valued. I told him flat out that our marriage was over and that I would be sending him the divorce papers. His face looked dumbfounded, like he couldn't believe what was happening. He slowly blinked and just stared at my face. I handed him my lawyer's card and told him I would be moving out that very day, and if he wanted to talk to me about the divorce, he could contact my lawyer. His parents, understandably concerned, tried to console me, telling me that Sam was probably acting this way because of his medication, that he didn't really know what he was saying or doing. They seemed to be looking for a way to excuse his behavior, trying to explain it away as just a temporary lapse caused by his depression and the drugs. But I told them that their son was nothing but a loser who had been dragging me down for the past several months with his talk of depression and grief. There was no more waiting, no more hoping things would change. I had given everything I could to this relationship when he had only disrespected me time and time again. This time I was going to put myself first. Sam tried to meekly argue that I couldn't just walk out of our marriage over something as silly as this and that we needed to go back to counseling to work things out. I laughed bitterly at his suggestion, shaking my head. I told him that he absolutely needed a counselor, but that didn't mean I did. I wasn't crazy or unwell like him. I wasn't the one who was going around making reckless and selfish demands or blaming my partner for my own poor choices. I made it clear that I was not going to waste any more of my time trying to fix a marriage that I no longer wanted to fix. Without saying another word, I walked out of his sister's house and headed straight to our home, where I began packing. By the time Sam finally got home in an Uber, frantically calling out my name, I was already ready to leave. When he arrived, he immediately tried the same old begging tactic again, pleading with me, insisting that we could work through this hiccup in our marriage. He even tried to hold on to my luggage as a way to prevent me from walking out. But I informed him that if he stopped me from leaving, then I would call 911 on him and make our divorce process even more difficult for him. I asked him firmly to not stop me from walking out with my things, and begrudgingly, he let me. I then quickly packed up my stuff and left to stay at a motel. Update 3. Thank you everyone for your comments. I feel much better after reading them. Ever since that day, I am currently living out of a motel. Sam has been sending me multiple voicemails. One moment, he's accusing me of being heartless, telling me I'm ruining everything, and the next, he's apologizing for his behavior, expressing how sorry he is for what he's done. It's been a constant emotional roller coaster, and it's clear to me now that he's trying to manipulate the situation, playing on my emotions to get me to reconsider. But at this point, I'm not giving in. His words don't change the fact that I made a decision based on the person he's become, and I'm not going back to the way things were. I've heard enough excuses and false promises. I need to focus on moving forward and healing from everything that's happened. To clear up any confusion once and for all, I'm not leaving my ex because of his depression. I have a huge amount of respect for people going through mental health conditions. Depression is a serious struggle, and I do not want to minimize it. However, when it comes to my relationship with my ex, I am just exhausted because of his lack of accountability. He has constantly used his depression as an excuse to demand whatever he wants from me. This is not fair. I've given more than enough of myself to try and help him. But there comes a point when no single person can carry all this weight alone. Since leaving him, I have felt much better. I have been able to focus on myself, and being away from him has lessened my anxiety also. It's heartbreaking to break my marriage, but I have to walk away for my own mental and emotional health. Update 4. It's been 5 months since my last update. I didn't update anything earlier as nothing was finalized until this month. Sam and I are officially divorced, and I can finally say I'm a free woman. Sam and I split the proceeds from the sale of our house equally. Thankfully, we didn't have any major liabilities or children, so there were no alimony payments involved. This day didn't come easily. There were countless moments when Sam and his family tried everything they could to change my mind, to convince me to stay, to believe that things could somehow go back to normal. His mother, for example, came to see me several times after I had moved out. She was on her son's side during the divorce proceedings and was constantly trying to guilt me into staying with Sam. She kept saying that he needed a supportive partner like me and that it was my duty to stay because of our marriage vows. At first, I tried to be polite and reason with her, but as she kept coming back, I became more frustrated with her approach. Finally, during one of her visits, I decided to be honest with her. I told her that Sam had once slapped me in anger and that I should have left him long before then. I asked her if her own husband had ever done that, would she have stayed? I told her that despite everything, I had stayed, even though Sam didn't deserve my forgiveness. She was completely shocked by what I said, and after that, she never came to bother me again. During the divorce proceedings, I have noticed that Sam has gone even deeper into his depression, and honestly, he looks worse than he did before. I hope his family gets him the right help. Sam's sister is the only one who believes I did the right thing by leaving her brother. She and I have continued to remain friends. Currently, I've finally moved into a place of my own. Honestly, as a newly divorced woman, it feels so liberating to be freed of my ex. I'm proud of myself for trusting my instincts and choosing to leave a toxic relationship before things could have spiraled any further. Now, I wake up when I want, with no one to answer to. I can focus on my career without distractions, and I'm able to spend time with my coworkers and friends, guilt-free. I come and go as I please, and it's a feeling I haven't had in a long time. For the first time in a while, I feel like I'm truly living for myself again without the weight of someone else's sadness and demands dragging me down. And that, for me, is worth everything.